months of a campaign that's taken us from the rocky coast of Maine to the sunshine of California, we are 1 week away from bringing change to America. In 1 week, you can turn the page on policies that put the greed and irresponsibility of Wall Street ahead of the hard work and sacrifice of Main Street. In 1 week, you can choose policies that invest in our middle class and create new jobs and grow the economy from the bottom up so that everyone has a chance to succeed. From the CEO to the secretary, from the factory owner to the men and women on the factory floor. In 1 week, you can put an end to the politics that would divide a nation just to win an election, that tries to pit region against region and city against town and Republican against Democrat, that asks us to fear at a time when we need to hope. In 1 week, at this defining moment in history, all of you can bring this country the change we need. Now, we began this journey in the depths of winter nearly 2 years ago on the steps of the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois. And back then we didn't have much money, we didn't have many endorsements, we weren't given much of a chance by the polls and the pundits, and we knew how steep the climb was going to be. But I also knew this. I knew that the size of our challenges had outgrown the smallness of our politics. I believed that Democrats and Republicans and Americans of every political stripe, that they were hungry for new ideas, and new leadership, and a new kind of politics. One that favors common sense over ideology. One that focuses on those values and ideals that we hold in common as Americans. And most of all, I believed in you. I believed in your ability to make change happen. I knew that the American people were a decent, generous people who were willing to work hard and sacrifice for future generations. And I was convinced that when we come together, our voices are more powerful than the most entrenched lobbyists, or the most vicious political attacks, or the full force of the status quo in Washington that wants to keep things just the way they are. And 21 months later, my faith in the American people has been vindicated. That's how we've come so far, how we've come so close because of you. And that's how we're going to change this country, with your help. And that's why we can't afford to slow down or sit back or let up 1 day, 1 minute, 1 second in this last week. Not now, not when there's so much at stake, not when the issues we face are so important to this country. We're in the middle of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. 760,000 workers have lost their jobs since the beginning of this year. Families and businesses can't get credit. Home values are plummeting. Pensions are disappearing. Wages are lower than they've been in a decade, at a time when the cost of everything from health care to college to food have all skyrocketed. You got an amen there. By the way, if you guys want to sit down, I won't be insulted. You guys have chairs. It's getting harder and harder to make the mortgage, or fill up your gas tank, or even just keep the electricity on at the end of the month. At a moment like this, the last thing we can afford is 4 more years of the tired, old, worn-out theory that says we should give more and more money to billionaires and to big corporations and hope that prosperity trickles down on everybody else. The last thing we can afford is 4 more years where no one in Washington is watching anyone on Wall Street because the politicians and the lobbyists killed common sense regulations. These are the theories that got us into this mess. They haven't worked. It is time for new ideas. And that's why I'm running for president of the United States of America. McCain has served this country with distinction in uniform. And he can point to a few moments over the past 8 years, for example, his opposition to torture, where he's broken from George W. Bush. He deserves credit for that. Nothing wrong with that. That's worthy of applause. But when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the central issue of this election, the plain truth is that John McCain has stood with George Bush every step of the way. Voting for the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy that he once opposed. Voting for the Bush budgets that sent us into debt. Calling for less regulation 21 times just this year. Those are the facts. And now, after 21 months and 3 debates, John McCain still has not been able to tell any of you, the American people, a single major thing he'd do differently from George Bush when it comes to the economy. Not one thing. Now, John McCain's been saying lately that we can't spend the next 4 years waiting for our luck to change. He's right, but you understand that the biggest risk we could take is embracing the same old tired Bush-McCain policies that have failed us for the last 8 years. It's not change when John McCain wants to give a $700,000 tax cut to the average Fortune 500 CEO. That's not change. It's not change when John McCain wants to give $200 billion to the biggest corporations, or $4 billion to the oil companies, or $300 billion to the same Wall Street banks that got us into this mess in the first place. It's not change when he comes up with a tax plan that doesn't give a penny of tax relief to more than 100 million middle-class families. That's not change. Now, to be fair, there is one thing he'll change, and that's called our health care system. But he won't change it in a good way. John McCain's health care plan would tax your health care benefits for the first time in history. Independent studies say that under his plan, at least 20 million Americans would lose their employer-based insurance that they currently rely on. People would be forced to buy health care coverage in the individual market. For all of this, he'd only give your family a $5,000 tax credit when the average plan costs over $12,000. Now, Senator McCain doesn't like to talk about this plan all that much. But this morning, we were offered a stunning bit of straight talk, an October surprise from his top economic advisor, who actually said that the health insurance people currently get from their employer is, and I quote, way better than the health care they'd be getting if John McCain were president. Now, this is the point I've been making since Senator McCain unveiled his plan. It took until the last 7 days of this election for his campaign to finally admit the truth. But better late than never. The truth is, John McCain's health care plan is radical, it is unaffordable, it's not the change we need right now. And that's why you need to vote this election. Listen, look, we have tried it John McCain's way. It's not as if he's come up with a bunch of new ideas. We've seen how it works. We've seen what happens over the last 8 years because his way is George Bush's way. And over the last 8 years, it has not worked. Those are just the facts. I don't think anybody can dispute it. And deep down, even Senator McCain knows that, which is why his campaign said, and I quote, "If we keep on talking about the economy, we're going to lose." That's why I keep on talking about the economy.